I recently came across the selling price of some graded video games that I grew up playing, and my mind like exploded. Like, these prices are nuts. For anybody who thinks that like toys are expensive collectibles, or even comics, because you think comics from the 80s and 90s graded, no, they're nothing like this. These prices are freaking insane. You're not going to believe it. It's fun. We don't usually talk about video games. We just talk about collecting, so we're gonna go to a different realm of collecting today. Also, I recognize that to move forward into the future, I need to see eye to eye with the youth, and that means speaking their language. So with my team's help and in the spirit of attempting to bring the youth into the Nerdzoic world, I'm going to speak in a way that only they can understand. So sit down on your 𝐒𝐈𝐒𝐢𝐷, let's do this thing. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt, often called Big Nerdy. Together we are the NWO, the Nerd World Order, and this is Nerdzoic. Okay, we're really doing the Generation Alpha slang. I feel like Steve Buscemi undercover at a high school.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
I don't think anybody would have thunk it back in the 80s and 90s that these video games, like if you didn't open and use them, they would go for stupid, insane money someday. We're going to do this countdown style. We're going to look at the 10 most expensive video games ever sold. Now, everything mentioned in this is both sealed and graded. Thank you, producer Kyle, for doing the research. If anybody finds any errors, I blame him. We're going to start with a couple honorable mentions that would be high in the top 10, if not for the fact that I felt like an asterisk was needed. So we pulled them out and made them honorably mentionable. First, Tetris from the Sega Mega Drive. Say that 10 times fast. This thing sold for
$1 million.
That said, this version was never available to the public and it was signed by the creator. Also, I have no clue if the autograph is even verified, so that's kinda sus. Next up is Super Mario 2 for the NES. This was a special Japan-only release. Later, this version of the game was brought to the States as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, and this specific Japanese version recently sold for $324,000. This might be a controversial take here, but of the three OG Mario games, this one's low-key the worst game. The final honorable mention is a specific sale of Super Mario Bros. This could not go into the top 10 because it just didn't pass the vibe check. This version that I'm referencing sold for $2 million. That would make it the most valuable video game sold of all time. However, it was not sold at like a traditional auction, it was through Rally House, which is basically like a crowdsourced investment into a collectible that I never heard of until now and kinda curious about, but not if they're gonna mark things up that much. Let's go to the top 10. We're gonna start off with a bang because there's two number 10s. Number 10A, Twisted Metal. This came out in 1995 for the PS1, and a graded copy recently sold for $156,000. This is a skibbity-doop-dop Ohio rare production variant copy that had a ridged long box casing. This is the first style of casing that was used for the PS1 games. I actually remember it, strangely enough. Let's go to the second half of number 10 on our countdown. Number 10B. Super Mario Bros. 3. This came out in 1988 for the NES, and a graded copy sold for, well, $156,000, the same as Twisted Metal, that's why it's tied. This specific copy is an early release, and you can actually see the text of the title overwrapping Mario's hat rather than right above it, which is what the packaging was changed to. But this early packaging error is why it was so rare. This came out in 88. I remember specifically, I think it was Christmas of 88, maybe 89. I wanted this so bad. My parents, I think, wanted it for them more, but we looked everywhere for it. We went to the Toys R Us in Oxford Valley, nothing. We went to the Kitty City on Oxford Valley, nothing. We went for the Kitty City in Feasterville, nothing. We went to the Toys R Us in Penn Salem, nothing. We finally found it though, vivid memory unlocked here. My grandmother, she died in 93, she was gonna take me out to buy a video game. I wanted this, but we all assumed we weren't gonna find it. So we were going to get Paperboy. When we got there, we were getting Paperboy. This is back when you had to bring the little paper slip to the counter, and we just happened to ask, my grandmother did, do you have, what's it called, Super Mario 3? And the girl goes, actually, I'm standing on a box of them. I remember that vividly, the standing on a box. Maybe this is where the hunter in me began. Number 9, Final Fantasy. This came out for the NES in 1987, and obviously it's what launched the Final Fantasy franchise that's still in existence today. This is the highest graded copy in existence. Nothing has ever graded higher, so this is the only 9.8, so guess what? Big bucks. How many big bucks? $204,000. Number 8 is Resident Evil for the PS1, and it came out in 96. One of these sold for $264,000. Like the previously mentioned Twisted Metal, this had the early packaging with the ridged like style on the side. So yeah, not that many copies of it to begin with. In fact, there's only 10 known sealed copies in the world. Forget about graded. Number 7, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! This came out in 1987 for the NES and recently sold for $312,000. Yes, that's a lot of money, but in fairness, it is the only one in existence. It is the only 9.8 of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! 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 I still remember playing this with my buddy Clifton, not Clifford. It wasn't a big red dog, and I gotta tell you, I used to slay at this game, no cap. I'm not trying to flex here, maybe a little flex. Number 6 is Super Mario World for the Super NES, and it came out in 1991 and recently sold for $360,000. Little secret here, I have zero connection to this game at all, because in my entire life, like even as an older gamer later on buying retro consoles, I never owned a Super Nintendo. There, I said it, okay? I said it. But there's a reason, because my family, we chose Sega, which brings us to number 5. Number 5 is none other than the original Sonic the Hedgehog from 1991 on the Sega Genesis. A 9.4 graded copy of this sold for $420,000. What's insane about that is it's really not as rare as some of the ones we've already talked about that sold for less. There's a total of 42 sealed graded copies of this. There are 17 others that are even higher grade than this one, but none of those have ever been sold publicly at auction, so we don't really know how much they go for. Theoretically, they could be number 1 on the list someday. And make no mistake, Sonic the Hedgehog was a great game, even if it felt like he got ratioed by Mario. Sticking to the Sega Genesis, number 4 is John Madden Football. The first release of this was in 1990, and this specific version was from the Sega Genesis. This one sold for $480,000 back in 2022 for a 9.2 sealed copy. There's only 14 graded copies of this. It's pretty insane. I actually never even had this one because early on with the Sega, with the football games, I was doing Joe Montana's Sports Talk Football. I still love that game and I got it in my head. There was also like a run pass bootleg option that you could do, and every single time the wide receiver was wide open. So yes, I kind of cheated. I do gotta say though that in 2024, on God, Madden has become pretty cringe. At this point, the franchise is pretty washed. I think the thing that really killed its longevity, at least in my heart, is not the old school commentary of Madden and Pat Summerall. Man, when those two were together, they just got in the kitchen and they cooked. Number 3 is Super Mario Bros. For the NES that sold for $720,000 for a 9.6. There's something about Mario, guys. He just got that riz. I know, we talked about this in the honorable mentions, but remember, that copy was sold to like that weird rally house investment firm for collectibles own a share thing. Even 40 years later, I love to play the first Mario Brothers game. Like that game is pure fire. It got that drip. I'm starting to feel really old. Number 2 is The Legend of Zelda, which came out in 1996 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This copy was a 9.0 and it sold for $870,000. Initially, there was not a short supply of these. They sold over 6.4 million copies of this game. But this specific version, it's a variant copy that was only sold for 2 months in 1987, and there's only 4 that have ever been graded. The game itself is what's known as a no Rev A cartridge, meaning it had 5 screws instead of 3. I don't know why that's pertinent, but according to producer Kyle's research, it is. The fun thing about Zelda is that certain people will argue that Zelda is in fact the first open world game. I don't agree with that though. In fact, here's a little secret for you.
There's one more secret I feel I have to share with you.
I never liked Zelda. I don't know. I never liked Zelda. It insists upon itself. I'm gonna give you a clue.
It's me, Mario.
Coming in at number 1, Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64. Did the clue help you? This came out in 1996, and a graded sealed copy that was a 9.8 went for $1.56 million. Not only is this the highest grade copy in existence, it is the only 9.8 grade copy in all of existence. Good lord, 1.56 million. Get you some of that. I didn't even know that the Nintendo 64 was a thing, or that it was coming out, and I vividly remember going to Toys R Us at Franklin Mills, and they would kind of like shutter you in through the doors, and then you come around the corner and into the video game section, and as I was turning, I remember hearing, "It's a me, Mario." Okay. And I was like, he's back. Did they think people wouldn't recognize him? I have no idea. If you enjoyed this break from talking about toy collecting, then check out this video here where I talk about comic collecting, specifically some crazy valuable books from the 90s. And remember, you gotta get old, you don't have to grow up. Just be cool and stay nerdy. I don't know what this is. What am I doing? Bang bang. The bang bang thing's becoming branding, guys. Get a t-shirt of that.